war crime is an act that constitutes a serious violation of the laws of war. Examples of war crimes include intentionally killing civilians or prisoners, torture, rape, and using child soldiers. This is the conventional definition of war crimes. Israel has, however, found a way to add to this horrendous list. Human Rights Watch says the Israeli military's demolition of Palestinian schools amounts to a war crime.
So I think we're seeing now, this onslaught, this attack on schools now is just the last, I suppose, the last layer of an attack on human rights.
In its recent report, Human Rights Watch said Israel's repeated denials for Palestinians to build schools in the occupied West Bank and the razing of schools makes it impossible for thousands of children to get an education. Currently, 44 Palestinian schools are at risk of full or partial demolition because Israel says they were built illegally. The Israeli military razes schools without considering whether the children in the area have access to schools or not. But why schools?
I think that the target now seems to be school children themselves, which is a really sad and tragic situation that we're looking at.
The demolition of schools not only deprives children from an education, it also forces the displacement of the local population, which again constitutes a war crime. UN figures show since Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu took office in early 2009, Israeli forces have demolished more than 5,000 Palestinian buildings in the West Bank, displacing nearly 8,000 people. That includes more than 4,000 children. But as Israel steps up its pressure to carry out its ethnic cleansing policies in the occupied territories, Palestinians in the Gaza Strip have begun a new movement. Since the 30th of March, Gazans have been holding weekly marches on Fridays called the Great March of Return. The 6-week protest is set to accumulate on May the 15th, Nakba Day, when Palestinians mark the ethnic cleansing of the lands on which Israel was established in 1948. Israeli forces have killed dozens of these protesters and wounded thousands others with live ammunition. Just last Thursday, a Palestinian journalist succumbed to the wounds he'd sustained during the protests. He was the second journalist killed by the Israelis. Both journalists were wearing protective gear marked press. The world's begun to notice the recent atrocities taking place in Gaza. The UN representative to the region has condemned Israel's outrageous actions. The international community has joined in on the condemnation too, but all that means nothing to Israel. The regime has the backing of the US.
We can first of all look at the Trump factor. Since Mr. Trump, more recently in the last year, I think there's been an upscale in the attacks on such institutions like schools, because Trump has given green light to the Israeli authorities to go ahead and just completely disregard all, even remnants of anything that looks like human rights on the side of the Palestinians.
Today, there are more than 7 million Palestinian refugees around the world. These are people who were displaced in 1948 and their descendants. That means 1 in every 3 refugees worldwide is Palestinian. Those who still remain in their ancestral home, Palestine, are living on occupied lands called the West Bank and what has been called as the world's largest open-air prison, the Gaza Strip.